A heavily armed shooter fired through the windows of a Minneapolis Catholic school at the beginning of Mass this morning, killing two. Hera joins me now. And Chief, thank you for being here with us tonight. I can only imagine what your day has been like. Just starting off, can you give us any updates on the 14 kids and the 3 elderly victims who were hurt today and how we know they're doing tonight?
Yes, well, obviously the entire community here has been traumatized by what has happened. 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, have been killed. They were pronounced deceased at the scene. And then the remaining victims, thankfully, are all expected to survive.
Do you know how many of the kids that were hurt are still in the hospital tonight?
Yes, some of the children have been released, but there are a number that still remain in the hospital. They had a range of injuries. One, I believe, was only like a graze wound from a gunshot wound, all the way to some very, very serious and life-threatening injuries that thankfully they are expected to survive from.
Yeah, and we're so grateful to hear that they are expected to survive. That was obviously everyone's first concern hearing that. For the families of that 8-year-old and the 10-year-old who were killed, have you had a chance to speak with those families?
I have not personally spoken with the families of the 2 children who were deceased. I know they were present here, and it was a very, very difficult process for our officers that had to make those notifications, as well as, obviously all of the family members who had children attending school here. It was a very emotional day. I actually had one of the parishioners come up to me, very emotional, describing the first police officer that went into the church. He said a number of children he was huddled with, and they were just terrified over what was happening. And he saw a police officer in a regular uniform, not wearing a helmet, not with any rifle or SWAT gear, run in and ask him where the shooter was. He said he pointed the direction where the shooter had come from, and he said that officer ran directly to where the shooting had happened. And he told me that was the first time he and the other children there, the children that were there, began to feel some sense of safety.
I mean, just the thinking of what those kids felt in that moment. I mean, hearing from them, I think is devastating. Where were you when you found out about the shooting?
I was downtown, and I got a call immediately once it was confirmed. I responded and got here about 20 or 25 minutes after the first officer arrived.
When it comes to the school itself, do you know if the school had ever asked for a law enforcement presence to be there before as a precaution?
I don't have information about that. I do know, obviously, the school has its own safety procedures that are in place. It's a Catholic school that serves the community here. And I actually believe they have had trainings where they drill for these types of things. And even I am told that during the Mass this morning, a number of the doors had been locked once Mass began, which is part of their normal procedure. And obviously we believe that this step also played a part in ensuring this tragedy did not become that much worse.
On the shooter,
a number of the children had, even described, getting down and taking cover and helping others get cover as they had practiced before.
Yeah, just to think that kids know what to do in that situation speaks to, I think, a lot. My mom is a 4th grade teacher, and they practice these things regularly. Sir, can I ask you, on the investigation itself, have you learned anything more about a potential motive here, given the videos and the writings that we know that have been posted online?
Sure. Well, there were 4 search warrants that have been conducted. At least one is still, the scene is still being processed right now. There are documents that have been retrieved, dozens of pages that the FBI is helping us go through. So, what we've seen so far is just a variety of hate, just really deranged comments and almost like an idolizing of previous active shooters. So right now we don't have a clear motive to establish for why he did this at the church today. We are obviously open to every possibility, and we're hopeful that once we are able to go through the scene, all of the evidence that's collected, that we'll be able to better provide answers for our community.
Yeah. What were those other, I understand one's still ongoing, but what were the other places where you executed those search warrants?
There were three. One is the church, and then there are three residences in the Twin Cities metro that are associated with the shooter that search warrants were approved and have been executed.
And we saw a yearbook photo, but can you confirm that the suspect attended the grade school at Annunciation?
Yes, we believe that the suspect at some point was a student here or a member of the parish, and that a family member here also worked for the church. So he did have a connection, some level of a personal connection to the church. Yep.
And in those writings and videos that you've been seeing, I know you mentioned a lot of hate. We've heard from the FBI director say that they're investigating this as domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. Have you seen anything that would speak to that so far?
Well, I can tell you there is no question whatsoever that for the children, for the parishioners, for the family members that have been infected here, that this was absolutely terrorizing for them. There's no question about it. But again, getting back to the actual motive per se, we are not ruling anything out. We are open to all possibilities, and we will examine all of the evidence as we get it, and then provide an accounting for anything we have to show as far as what the motive may have actually been.
And as far as the weapons, I know there were several. They're very popular firearms. Do you know if they were purchased in your state? Have you determined that yet?
As far as the weapons, there were three on the scene here. They were lawfully purchased. He had a permit to purchase that was issued in Minnesota recently. I don't have information about where specifically those weapons were purchased, but they were purchased lawfully.
Chief, I know that you've seen a lot today, and we heard from a fifth grader talking about what it was like to be inside Mass this morning when this happened. Can I just ask personally how you're doing tonight with your community going through something like this?
I'm a parent myself. I have children, as do many of the men and women, police officers and the first responders that came here this morning, and just walked into this unthinkable act of violence. And so obviously, we are concerned as we go through this investigation and, continue to handle the day-to-day responsibilities of the police department, that we look out for the health and wellness of our members that came here, not just our sworn officers, but our civilian professional staff, our crime lab personnel, because this is one of those scenes that's just deeply traumatizing.
The United States flag outside the White House has been lowered to half-staff as the nation mourns two children, ages 8 and 10, who were killed in a shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis earlier today. The children were sitting with classmates in church pews during a mass. At least 17 others are wounded, 14 of them children as young as 6 years old. We just learned the 3 adult victims are parishioners in their 80s. The Minneapolis police chief just moments ago said all of the injured victims are expected to survive. The school includes students pre-K through 8th grade. This was the first week of school. The mayor of Minneapolis today expressing profound grief and frankly also some anger at the failure of our leaders to take sufficient, meaningful action to prevent the continuation of massacres like these in the United States.
Don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church.
Moments ago, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, said these kids went to school to find learning and curiosity, and they were met with something very different.
They were met with evil and horror and death. And we often come to these and say, these unspeakable tragedies, or there's no words for this. There shouldn't be words for these types of incidents because they should not happen.
Police say the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound after using 3 different weapons to shoot dozens of rounds into the church windows from outside the building. Police are still working to determine a motive based on the ample evidence the shooter left behind. They did say the shooter did not have an extensive known criminal history.
We're also aware of a manifesto that the shooter had timed to be released on YouTube. This manifesto appeared to show him at the scene and included some disturbing writings.
Sources say authorities are evaluating, in addition to the manifesto, a series of videos posted to YouTube by a user identified as Robin W. They are trying to authenticate them and potentially learn more about the motivations in this horrific attack. The videos, which have been taken down, were first uploaded earlier today before the shooting. We have a lot more, and there's a lot of breaking news about this horrific incident. CNN law enforcement correspondent Whitley Wild is on the scene in Minneapolis with the latest on what we know about how this shooting unfolded.
There are no words that can capture the horror and the evil of this unspeakable act. Children are dead.
A peaceful start to the day ends in tragedy after a gunman opens fire during Mass at a Catholic church and school in Minneapolis, killing 2 children.
A possible active shooter.
The troopers responded. We received a lot more medical.
It happened just before 8:30 this morning, local time. Police say dozens of children were inside the Mass.
It was like shots fired, and then we kind of like got under the pews. It kind of, they shot through the stained glass windows, I think, and it was really scary. And I just ran under the pew, and then I covered my head. My friend like saved me though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit. He went to the hospital. I was like 2 seats away from the stained glass windows, so they were like, the shots were like right next to me.
Monday marked their first day back at the preschool through 8th grade school.
During the Mass, a gunman approached on the outside, on the side of the building, and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the Mass. 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed where they sat in the pews.
Minneapolis police rushed to the scene and entered the church to try and provide first aid to victims and also rescue some of the children who were hiding in the building.
You cannot put into words the gravity, the tragedy, or the absolute pain of this situation.
This man lives near the church and heard the gunfire.
I said there's no way that could be gunfire. There was so much of it. So it was sporadic.
He rushed to the scene and spoke to a survivor as he came out of the church.
He said it looked like just a normal Sunday Mass. So it was full, of people and children. He just ran, when the fire, he said it seemed like it went on for eternity, but when it stopped, he ran out of the building.
Victims are now being treated at local hospitals, including Hennepin Healthcare, which says many of its victims are young. The chair of emergency medicine at the hospital says 4 of the patients required surgery.
9 of the 11 patients were pediatric ages. I can't remember the exact ages. I believe it's 6 all the way up to 14. That's the range.
Police say the investigation is just beginning and that the gunman was in his early 20s and armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol.
This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping. The coward who fired these shots ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church.
This kind of act of evil should never happen, and it happens far too often.
Jake, anyone with children at a Catholic school, at a religious school, knows how important that first day is, that moment when everyone goes to Mass, and quite often that special experience to kick off the school year is shared with family members. What is abundantly clear here after hearing from the principal and the mayor is that what was supposed to be a very special day has been completely destroyed, lives upended. This has reached the Pope. The Vatican sent his deepest sorrows to the Archdiocese here, who read a statement from Pope Leo earlier today. We'll have much more on that later in the show, Jake. But back to the investigation. What we know now is that police are looking into a series of quite bizarre videos. Some of them are rambling. Some of the information indicates that he had this real obsession with shooters and shows rambling written statements. Jake, finally, what we know is that the firearms were purchased legally and recently. Jake?
Whitney Wild in Minneapolis, thanks so much. And we are learning a lot of new information about the shooter. We are trying to verify it and make sure it's accurate before we bring any information to you. A video posted on YouTube does appear to show the shooter rambling, saying things such as, "I don't remember how far I went, and there's bugs in my skin, and I can't deal with this anymore." We saw a person flipping through notebook pages with indiscernible writing. Some pages showed dates, including today's date, August 27th. In a different video, you hear the shooter referencing a message left to the family.
Here's my note to my family.
Let's bring in CNN's Brian Todd, who is tracking part of this part of the story. Brian, what else are we learning about the shooter?
Jake, we've obtained significant new information on the shooter. Here's what we can tell you right now. The FBI has identified the shooter as Robin Westman, 23 years old. The agency is calling this, quote, an act of domestic terrorism, but the police say they do not have a motive yet to establish it as a hate crime. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara says Westman has no prior criminal history. The shooter was armed with a rifle, shotgun, and a pistol, which the police chief said all were obtained recently and legally. They were purchased by the shooter. According to a yearbook obtained by CNN, Westman graduated from Annunciation Catholic's grade school in 2017. According to a social media post, Westman's mother previously worked at Annunciation from 2016 through 2021. Police are investigating, as Whitney pointed out a moment ago, online videos apparently posted by the shooter, which describe an obsession with school shootings. The videos show a rambling written statement with guns painted with slurs, with the names of mass killers, including the shooter at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012, and also some political messages in that rambling written statement. In the videos, which are titled with Westman's full name, the person recording them pages through this handwritten notebook. The notebook describes feelings of self-hatred and wishes to die. And the words, "I'm so sorry," are written in large letters on one page. The notebook also includes a diagram of the inside of a church, which appears to match the layout of Annunciation Catholic Church. The person recording shows themselves stabbing a knife into that drawing of the layout of that church while saying the words, quote, "ha, nice." Jake, again, piecing together this information, all of it incredibly disturbing. And again, as I think people have been pointing out since this happened, you see obviously some real clues here as to what a motive could be, but they're not saying formally what it is yet.
All of America is mourning this tragedy, including President Trump, who has ordered all flags to be flown at half-mast through Sunday. We go now to Lucas Tomlinson with the latest from the administration. Lucas.
Good morning, Ashley and Todd. The shooter was born Robert Westman, but changed his name to Robin 6 years ago. First Lady Melania Trump offering her condolences, writing, quote, "My heart is shattered for the families and friends of the victims of today's senseless and depraved violent act. The shooting began during a school-wide mass marking the beginning of the school year at around 8:30 local time yesterday morning. The shooter opened fire with a rifle, shotgun, and pistol, all legally purchased weapons, according to police. 2 children ages 8 and 10 were killed. 17 others were wounded, including 14 children and 3 elderly individuals. Also, according to police, his mother previously worked at the school. FBI Director Kash Patel is calling this a hate crime, posting, "The FBI is investigating this shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and hate crime targeting Catholics. The FBI will continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able." Now, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says the shooter at the Catholic school was a 23-year-old man claiming to be transgender. The words "for the children" and "where is your God" and "kill Donald Trump" were written on a rifle magazine. That's according to Kristi Noem. She also said, quote, "Our deepest prayers are with the children, parents, families, educators, and Christians everywhere. We mourn with them, we pray for healing, and we will never forget them." Now, there have been 415 hostile acts against the church across the country this year. There's also been a sharp rise in attacks on Christians over the past 7 years. Attacks have increased 730% since 2018. Now, the shooter fired through the windows of the church and did not enter the building. He later died by suicide. Ashley, Todd.
Lucas Tomlinson live for us. Lucas, thank you. In just a few hours, Minnesota officials are expected to give an update on the shooting as we learn more about the shooter and their motive.
The coward that shot these victims took his own life in the rear of the church. That coward has been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman. No prior criminal history. As to the weapons used to perpetrate this horrific attack, there was a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. All three had been lawfully purchased by the shooter. At this stage, we believe that the shooter had acted alone. We are also aware of a manifesto that the shooter had timed to be released on YouTube. This manifesto appeared to show him at the scene and included some disturbing writings.
The shooting happened in Hennepin County, where Rich Stanek served as the sheriff. He joins us now. Rich, thanks for getting up and talking to us about this. I wish it was on better terms here, but you know, what makes me the most sick about all of this, when you think about it, are those two kids who lost their lives. Their parents were putting them to bed for the last time the night before he was filming this horrific and disturbing manifesto about what he was going to do the next day. And that does not sit well with me, and I know it doesn't sit well with other parents. Did you ever think that something like this would happen where you served as sheriff?
You know, there really aren't words that can describe what happened yesterday here in Minneapolis. I mean, reprehensible, cowardice, and honestly, the third one I can't even say on live TV. And talking with first responders who were at the scene, they said it was horrific and ghastly. Young kids, parents, the most vulnerable parts of our society. A church service, young school-age children in school that first week celebrating together, and then you have something like this.
When you talk to your colleagues in law enforcement there on the ground in Minnesota, had any of them heard anything about this killer before? In other words, was she on anybody's radar?
You know, I mean, the investigation will tell what exactly was the true motive. You've heard the FBI say they're looking at it as a domestic act of terrorism. You've heard them say they're looking at it as a hate crime. He really didn't have much of a criminal history. May have been a graduate of the school. Still a lot of facts that need to be dug up and brought to light. But at this point, it really doesn't matter. The horrific incident happened. Children are dead. 17 others were, shot. And that's just one part of a series of tragic homicides in the city of Minneapolis in just 24 hours or less. There were 5 people killed, 4 different shootings. A mass shooting just less than 20 hours before this, 2 miles away from this elementary school out in front of a high school. And, we can do so much better as residents of Minneapolis, the public. Everybody wants to help. Some people don't know quite how to help, but just be supportive.
The age of this person is something that comes into question for me. 21, 23 years old. And I'm just wondering, can the parents be held accountable for anything that happened here, or is the age, since this person was over the age of 18, can they not be held accountable?
No, I think, again, the facts will come out through the intense investigation by federal, state, local law enforcement, but it appears from what the Minneapolis police chief said that the guns were purchased illegally, not through a straw buyer, not something like that. But they're going to look at all those things. The fact of the matter is this suspect, if he was age 22, 23, is a legal adult here in Minnesota, in this country. And, you know, it's just tragic how this came to this. I'm sure they're going to find mental health issues. They're going to find, you know, patterns of behavior that weren't quite right. The question is, who did what when they learned about it? Who did they talk to? Who did they report it to? I saw, like many of you, his manifesto posted online yesterday afternoon. You watch that, 11 minutes of it like I saw, and you'll go, something is definitely wrong here. We can do so much better.
And to that point, Rich, Melania Trump speaking out following yesterday's horrific event, saying there needs to be some kind of preemptive intervention. And she's referring in large part to the mental health aspect of this. I'd like to focus on the law enforcement. I was listening to Trace Gallagher's show, and he had an individual, Aaron Cohen, on saying he's starting a program that basically has AI scouring the web for any possible warning signs. Would that help find and stop a potential killer like this well before they even think about doing something as horrific as this?
Well, law enforcement will tell you, the FBI will tell you that mental illness is a factor in many of these people who act out like this, and it's not the first time. This suspected shooter was not shy about using social media. As you know, he posted this and timed it so that it would be released after the shooting happened and maybe his death. I'm sure they're going to find a long trail of information about him and his motives. And again, why didn't somebody intervene? Why didn't somebody say something? We always find out afterwards. We do it kind of autopsy without blame, going back to an investigation to figure out why it happened, how it happened, who knew, and what can we do to do better, lessons learned. But it doesn't change the fact that these 2 young kids are dead, 17 others wounded. This community is in mourning. I was born and raised in this community. I spent 40 years as a police officer in the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. My colleagues who were at the scene, again, horrific and ghastly. No easy way to describe it.
And you, like Ashley said, we pray for the families, but you know, to this point about AI, there have to be some breadcrumbs that AI can work with law enforcement to find.
We've got technology coming out of our ears with everything else. I don't know why we can't do it with that.
Rich Stanek, thanks for your time.
You know, the technology is one part, folks, but you've also got to have in place something to do with it, something to react.
There has to be.
What you
People
find.
have to be.
That's a problem. It's an expensive proposition.
It is.
Well, we're wasting millions of dollars whenever they're needing, for all these politicians who need all of this money for their elections and their campaigns. If we can garner up hundreds of millions of dollars for campaigns, for politicians, we can get money to get armed guards and to get what we need to protect these kids.
It's all that matters. Rich Stanek, got to leave it there. We got to run.
Thanks,
Appreciate your time, sir. Thank you. Best of luck to you and your community.
Thanks,
we're praying.
We begin tonight with news breaking out of Minneapolis. There are so many senseless shootings in America, it can almost become horribly easy to get numb to them. But what happened today was so diabolical, it will be hard to forget. It happened during a mass at a Catholic school for pre-K through 8th grade kids, just 2 days into the new school year. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Police tonight are investigating why a shooter in his early 20s, dressed in black, opened fire through the stained glass windows of the school's church, spraying bullets at children as they sat and prayed in pews. 2 of those children are dead tonight and more than a dozen are hurt. The shooter then turned the gun on himself, killing himself and leaving behind a disturbing manifesto. It all happened at around 8:30 local time this morning at Annunciation Catholic Church. It's a private school with around 390 students. Those 2 children who died were only 8 and 10 years old. 17 other people were injured in the shooting, 14 of them children, at least one of them as young as 6. All of them are expected tonight to survive. Just yesterday, these kids were celebrating the start of a new school year, and now they're dealing with unfathomable tragedy. And the rest of us are left asking and wondering what would drive someone to do something so horrific. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara gave some insight into that in an update late this afternoon.
The coward that shot these victims took his own life in the rear of the church. That coward has been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman. No prior criminal history. As to the weapons used to perpetrate this horrific attack, there was a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. All 3 had been lawfully purchased by the shooter. At this stage, we believe that the shooter had acted alone. There is no indication of other suspects.
As you just heard, the gunman was identified as Robin Westman, but was born Robert Westman and changed his name to Robin when he was 17 years old. The police chief also confirmed the existence of that written manifesto that the gunman also recorded on video and then uploaded online.
We're also aware of a manifesto that the shooter had timed to be released on YouTube. Manifesto appeared to show him at the scene and included some disturbing writings. That content has since been taken down with the assistance of the FBI, and it now remains under active review by our investigators.
We are starting, however, to get images from what we believe to be that recording, and they reveal some very sick and disturbing messages. He wrote, "Kill Donald Trump" on a rifle magazine. In another image, you see the words, "For the children," and in another, "Where is your God?" And then we get a shot of the so-called manifesto itself. Part of it says, "I love you all. I will remember you. Pray for the victims and their families." He goes on to say, "I am not well. I'm in pain. I am haunted by these thoughts that do not go away. I've been waiting to do this." He writes, "P.S. I wouldn't recommend any of you to read my journals unless you really want to, but be warned." There are reports he had ties to this school. The New York Times is reporting that the gunman went there and graduated from 8th grade there, and that his mother used to work at the school. Joining me right now is retired Sheriff Rich Stanek. He was the Minnesota police officer for 35 years and was born and raised in this community. Also joining us is Tracy Walter, a former CIA officer and FBI special agent, now a News Nation national security contributor. Thank you both for being here. Tracy, what do you make of this manifesto? The police chief said it showed video of the shooter at the scene, so he was recording himself in that parking lot. We have screenshots saying, "I'm not well. I've been waiting a long time to do this." It's quite extensive.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. Really, what I make of this is obviously it speaks to the pre-planned nature, of this. Clearly, this individual had put a lot of thought and effort into obviously legally acquiring these weapons, writing this manifesto, and then timing that video. But I think what's going to be really critical, at least for the FBI, also for local law enforcement as well, is really going through that manifesto as well as his online activity to see where these ideas came from. If you notice on some of them, he has written in Cyrillic. And I think that's really key there in looking at some of these other investigations and individuals who've been radicalized on these chat rooms.
Rich, this is very prolific stuff. We're just showing a tiny part of it. This young man must have been clearly mentally ill to anybody in his vicinity.
You know, I had a chance earlier this morning to see that that video. It was on X. I watched it, about 11 minutes long. It was disturbing, to say the least. Like Tracy said, this attack was well planned out. He was armed to the hilt. He took all the precautions and preparatory steps that one would take to do something like this. And then you've got 2 young kids dead, 14 other kids injured by gunfire, 3 senior citizens who were in the church as well injured by gunfire. You know, where does it stop?
3 guns, it feels like overkill. Victims report that the shooting went on for 2 full minutes. Rich.
You know, it went on for 2 full minutes, but in the manifesto, in the video you just mentioned, he also talks about a revolver that he kept for himself. This was for him. Should something go awry, or at the end of this, he takes his own life, that's what he indicated he was going to use. So he fully planned on not walking away from this, doing as much damage and carnage as he did. And damage and carnage he did do.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Where's the shooter? No one knows.
Here in Minneapolis, school children scramble for safety during the latest mass shooting in America.
This time, it happened at a church where Catholic school students were celebrating Mass.
The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm John Dickerson. We begin tonight in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the site of the 8th school shooting this year in the United States where someone was injured or killed. Maurice Dubois is there.
John, this was both a church shooting and a school shooting involving dozens of Catholic school students celebrating the first Mass of the new school year. The FBI is investigating the attack as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. 2 children, 8 and 10 years old, are dead tonight. 17 people were wounded, most of them students, all expected to survive, however, thankfully. Officials say the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It happened this morning on the south end of Minneapolis at Annunciation Catholic Church, which is on the same grounds as Annunciation Catholic School, just a few steps away. And we caution you here, some of the images from the scene are hard to watch. This video was recorded inside the church just moments after the shooting stopped.
Where's the shooter? No one knows.
A parent offered the video to CBS News. The shooter opened fire during morning Mass. The students and faculty sought safety in the school's gymnasium and comfort in prayer. Some of the children were injured, others in shock. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara.
This worship service was marking the first week of school for children that are attending the Annunciation Catholic School. During the Mass, a gunman approached on the outside on the side of the building and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the Mass.
Where are they?
Shooting through the windows, he struck children and worshipers that were inside the building.
The ages of the injured range from 6 to 15, as well as parishioners in their 80s. 2 students, ages 8 and 10, were killed.
The shooter was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping. The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible.
5th grader Weston Halsney was seated near the stained glass windows when shots were fired.
The first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something. Then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew. And then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Your friend laid on top of you?
Yeah, and he got hit.
Heavily armed police and first responders arrived at the scene within minutes, rushing the injured to hospitals. Jacob Fry is the Minneapolis mayor.
These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church.
Police identified the shooter as 23-year-old Robin Westman, who was found dead from a self-inflicted wound. The suspect's mother once worked at the school. Police searched the shooter's home and tell CBS News the suspect had hand-drawn pictures of the church's layout and an ammunition clip with the words written, "Where is your God?" Classes had just begun on Monday. Nearly 400 students from preschool to 8th grade attend the Annunciation School, where, like so many Catholic schools across the country, children were dressed in uniform. Parents who had just dropped off their kids rushed back, enduring agonizing waits to be reunited with their loved ones. Zuhair Safi's granddaughter was injured in the shooting.
It should not be this way. People should not have guns.
The school's principal, Matthew DeBoer, demanded change.
There's nothing about today that can fill us with hope. We, as a community, have a responsibility to make sure that no child, no parent, no teacher ever has to experience what we've experienced today, ever again.
And you can feel the anger and frustration here in the community. We have an update now on Victor, the little boy who was shot while protecting his friend that you heard from in the church. Victor was taken to the hospital and is expected to be okay, thankfully. We turn now to investigative reporter Jonah Kaplan of our CBS Minnesota station, WCCO. And Jonah, you live here, you know the city well, you've been speaking with members of the church community. What have you learned?
Well, this is an area south Minneapolis. We're the city of lakes, and this kind of basks in that beauty. In this area, there are blue-collar families, a lot of middle-class families. The key word there, families. And I spoke with one father, Anders Holin. He had two daughters, 4th grade and 1st grade, in that church. He described to us the moments where he tried looking for them.
I pulled into the parking lot, shots were still going off. I saw a dad who works at the school, and I said, "Is the school locked down?" And he said, "There's a shooting at the church." And he said, "And all the kids are in there." And I just felt like I was going to throw up. And it was just chaos. Then just started helping kids out, saw a lot of injured kids. It was tough. And I just, selfishly was just like, where are my girls? Where is June and Olive? That's all I could think about. And I couldn't find them. And it was awful.
What's bedtime going to be like tonight? What's breakfast going to be like tomorrow morning?
Yeah, I called a friend who's a psychiatrist, and I said, "What do we do today?" And he said, "Just make a safe place for your emotions today." And so I had to take, a step upstairs and just let it out. And then I just want to show that my girls can be feeling whatever they feel.
Anders also said that he wants America to feel rage with him, but to turn that rage into productive action.
Jonah, what about keeping the kids calm? How did they do that? What do we know about that?
Yeah, there are nearly 400 kids in there. I spoke with a pastor. He said he tried to keep them calm in song. And this was one that even I recognize because I sing to my own kids. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I want to be a living sanctuary for you.
Meaningful.
Welcome back. Breaking right now, FBI Director Kash Patel just posted on X, quote, "The FBI is investigating the shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. There were 2 fatalities, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. In addition to those lives lost, 14 children and 3 adults have been injured. A bunch of them remain in critical condition. The shooter has been identified as Robin Westman. Born Robert Westman. The FBI is going to continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able. Let's go ahead and bring in retired NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow, an attorney, also a Fox News contributor. Paul, why do you think they are now pursuing this as an act of terrorism?
Look, they may have some indicia that there was this animus toward a particular religious group, which would make it a hate crime and potentially an act of terrorism if you have a mass shooting carried out for an ideological purpose. That is to say, if you get violence plus an ideological purpose, you get into the terrorism area. But let's be clear, at the federal level, you almost always need some connection to a foreign power. So the hate crime angle relative to this at the federal level is far more likely than it would be a terrorism case. But look, It's good that they're checking the box. It's good that they're looking at it that way. And they may have found something. You know, they may have had an interview with somebody who told them this, or they already got into the computer. There may be something there.
Could a terrorism designation kind of give the investigators more resources, or some kind of a benefit in pursuing, you know, whatever information can be gleaned about this?
You know,
now that the guy's dead.
In a practical sense, in a case like this, it's unlikely that it's going to matter. In a terrorism case, the reason you want that designation as a terrorist entity is because what you get then is that anything that's done in furtherance of that terrorist group, let's just say it's Al-Qaeda for the sake of argument, right, in a different instance, then anything you do that's in furtherance of that, think of it as conspiracy. Anything that you're doing in furtherance of the group is chargeable. And so that's why you like that bigger designation, because it takes you into a sort of a group. And anything you're doing on behalf of the group, like a RICO charge, anything you're doing on behalf of this group ends up being chargeable. But again, at the federal level, and this is why I've been somebody, and you know, people disagree with me on this, and reasonable minds can disagree. I get it, but I have often advocated that we should be looking hard at a domestic terrorism charge, which can be modeled on the state terrorism charges that do exist around the country. And that is simply violence for an ideological purpose. And you don't need necessarily a protected class like a religion or a particular ethnicity, but violence for an ideological purpose, that would get you to a terrorism charge. We don't have that, and so likely, I think, if the feds do charge here, it'll be more in the hate crime area, unless some fact that we don't know about now comes to light.
Well, and does any of this, I mean, not to be crude, but this guy is a murderer. He is now dead. Does it matter?
No. He's dead, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the investigation. I mean, just to be blunt about it, like I said, unless he does end up getting linked to a group, and let's take the terrorism charge out. Let's say he ends up being linked to a domestic group, let's say a hate group. Well, then it does matter, because what it allows you to do then is to start to scrape into that group. You can make it a conspiracy. You can configure it as a group of people who look to do something like this. And what I've been name checking all day is the thing that we had out in California where that guy bombed the fertility clinic. I don't remember his name, and I don't want to say it anyway. But while that didn't end up being a group, you know, we all went away thinking, okay, one and done. That case is over. The guy blew himself up and nothing else to worry about. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, they charge a second piece. They're going to go all the way on this because of how horrific it is. You can rest assured, federal, state, local, doesn't matter. They're going all the way.
I want to go ahead now and bring in correspondent Bill Malugin. He's been digging into the details all day. He has also covered many school shootings. It's an unenviable beat to be on. But Bill, you know, Trey Gowdy pointed out on our air earlier today that it seems over and over and over again, these mass shooters are young American men, usually in their 20s.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. We don't really know why, but that's the profile that's being fit in this one as well. You know, just looking at some of the information we're getting about the shooter here, identified as Robin Westman. You know, Fox News obtaining the paperwork that back in 2019, his parents filed in the state of Minnesota to allow him to change his name from Robert to Robin, and on that paperwork, it specifically said it's because he identified as female. So that was the reason for that name change. But you talk about like the profile of these young guys committing these shootings, that certainly does seem to be the case pretty much every time we have one of these high profile ones. It was the case in Uvalde, which, you know, I covered a few years ago. It was the case in Sandy Hook. Now, thankfully, it doesn't appear this incident is going to be as bad, but you look at some of the things that are floating around online right now in terms of some of the writings. You know, there's that manifesto flying around. We're obviously talking about a very sick individual here. It's going to take a while to figure out what, if any, motive there was here. You know, you guys have been talking about the FBI, how they're announcing they're going to potentially investigate this as domestic terrorism, and rightfully so. This shooter apparently knew these kids were going to be there en masse, in class, at that time of the day, and just decided to post up outside with 3 weapons, as we found out. The police saying he came with a rifle, with a shotgun, and with a handgun. And you know, I've been listening to the sound bites of those children witnesses. You have a 10-year-old kid saying that, you know, how terrifying it was to have bullets come flying through the stained glass He had the one little boy say his friend Victor laid on top of him to protect him, took a round. I mean, think about it. A little boy potentially taking a high velocity round from a rifle being shot at from a nut job in a parking lot. He's one of the boys in the hospital recovering right now. And at the end of the day, 2 young children dead, Jillian, ages 8 and 10, 17 others injured, 14 of which are children. Again, you were texting me about this earlier, and it's a perspective that's worth talking about. It's first week of school for these kids. This is the last thing they should be worrying about. They should be meeting friends and meeting their teachers and having a good time. But this person, for whatever reason, we'll see what the investigation plays out, just decided to show up to that parking lot, post up outside, and just start firing dozens of rounds into that church. And again, what we've heard from the witnesses is it was just pretty nonstop. We heard the witness this morning describing it as they thought somebody was working on their roofing nearby because the bang, 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 bang was just so nonstop. It's just yet another horrific incident. It's unfortunate we have to keep dealing with these every now and then, and it just makes it so much worse when it's a school involving young children, Jillian. I mean, these kids are so innocent, and here we go again, whether it's Sandy Hook, Uvalde, a school like this. You have these elementary-aged kids. You hear the innocence in their voice when they're interviewed by the media, and it's just hard to watch something like that, especially watching the parents show up. Like when I was at Uvalde, it was so hard because there were parents coming up to us, the media, asking us what information we had and holding up pictures saying, have you seen my little boy? Have you seen my little girl? Can you put it on the news right now? Can you get it out there? And you just see the panic in their faces. And watching the live shots that we've been doing all day long, you see that, right? Especially, Paul and I were on set together earlier this morning when the parents were first starting to show up, and you can see the panic in their eyes. You can see them looking for their kids. You can see the relief on their faces when they're able to find their kids and bring them out. Imagine being one of those parents who showed up and wasn't immediately able to find their child, or didn't know what hospital they're at, or didn't know what happened to them. It's just horrible stuff. So I understand we're waiting for the press conference with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Last check we got is that is running about 5 to 10 minutes behind. So we have that live shot popped up for our viewers in the bottom right of the screen. We'll wait for them to come out, and we'll see what kind of new developments we get. What, if any, further details we get on this shooter now, as the rest of these children and some of the adults who are injured are still recovering, Jillian.
We are indeed awaiting another news update. We're hoping to hear from the governor, Tim Walz, potentially law enforcement officials, health officials there in the county. Let's go ahead and play that sound you referenced, Bill, a 10-year-old who was on scene today, saw his friends get injured. It's incredibly difficult to watch, but guess what? We're going to play it because it's important that people see what is going on. Listen.
My friend ran, someone helped him run out. He saw him, he was wearing all black and he had a ski mask on. I was down, so I didn't really look up. I mean, he got shot through the stained glass windows. My friend Victor, he was laying on top of me, making sure I was safe, and he got hit. So that was really brave of him.
All right, let's bring in Ted Williams, former DC homicide detective, also a defense attorney and a Fox News contributor. I don't know, Ted, what do you say to something like that?
Jillian, is just so chilling to hear that young child. That young child, as many of the children that was.
There are no words that can capture the horror and the evil of this unspeakable act. Children are dead. There are families that have a deceased child. You cannot put into words the gravity, the tragedy, or the absolute pain of this situation. We are a Minneapolis family. But to everybody out there, do not think of these as just somebody else's kids. Those families are suffering immense pain right now. Think of this as if it were your own. Every one of us needs to be wrapping our arms around these families, giving them every ounce that we can muster. These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance. These are the sort of basic assurances that every family should have, every step of the day, regardless of where they are in our country. I'm so deeply saddened, and I'm so sorry to the families that I know are suffering right now. My ask is to everyone, stand by them. Love them. These families have forever been changed, and we've all been changed with them. We need to do everything possible to support them through this time. We have a family resource center that has been set up. I'm grateful for all of the law enforcement agencies from a number of different jurisdictions, and all the different departmental support that we've received. They're going to be working tirelessly. There's also a family resource center that is being set up as we speak to make sure that we're there for everybody. Again, to the families that are suffering, to those that have experienced loss, I'm so deeply sorry. We're going to be with you every step of the way. We love you. This kind of act of evil should never happen, and it happens far too often. The chief will provide additional details.
My name is Brian O'Hara, B-R-I-A-N, O''H-A-R-A. I am the Minneapolis Police Chief. Earlier today, just before 8:30 a.m., our city experienced an unthinkable tragedy. Minneapolis police officers responded to a report of a shooting at a mass that was happening at the Annunciation Roman Catholic Church on the block behind me. This worship service was marking the first week of school for children that are attending the Annunciation Catholic School. During the mass, a gunman approached on the outside, on the side of the building, and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the mass. Shooting through the windows, he struck children and worshipers that were inside the building. The shooter was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol. This was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping. The sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible. Police officers from the Minneapolis Police Department immediately responded, entered the church, and attempted to provide first aid and rescue some of the children that were hiding throughout the building, while other first responders came and EMS responded to rush victims to nearby hospitals. 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed where they sat in the pews. Their parents have been notified. 17 other people were injured, 14 of them being children. 2 of those children are in critical condition. The coward who fired these shots ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church. Our hearts are broken for the families who have lost their children, for these young lives that are now fighting to recover, and for our entire community that has been so deeply traumatized by this senseless attack. We will stand together to protect our children, our schools, and our houses of worship. This deliberate act of violence is just a sign of cruelty that is beyond comprehension. Our hearts are broken for everyone that's been affected by this tragedy. As we begin the difficult path of healing, I want the community to know this, that even in the face of such evil, the Minneapolis Police Department and all of our law enforcement partners stand with our community. We stand with these families and with this parish. We will continue to be here for you. With that, the investigation is obviously in its preliminary stages, and I will attempt to take some questions to provide further information.
Chief, what can you tell us about the suspect in this case? How old was he? Any kind of motivation? Any notes or any other information that were left behind?
So we were looking, the question was, what can be said about the shooter? We believe it is one suspect, a sole shooter. We believe he is deceased. He is in his early 20s, does not have an extensive known criminal history. And we are looking through information left behind to try and determine some type of motive. Yeah.
How many kids attend the school? How many kids at the school?
How many children? I don't have an exact, the question was how many children at the school. There were dozens of children inside the mass at the time. I don't have an exact count. The children have been relocated into the school, which is where their families are reunifying with them.
Do we know if the shooter, other than the weapons,
Reg.
Was the shooter a student, former student? Was he a former employee?
The question was, do we know if the shooter was a former school employee or a former student? We don't have that information.
Did you leave anything behind other than the weapon?
There's a vehicle. The question was anything left behind? There's a vehicle that we believe that the suspect used that is being searched, and we will be conducting other searches related to this. Inside the parking lot here. Yep.
There was some neighbors who said that the door to the church had been barricaded.
Yep. So the question was, neighbors had said that the door to the church had been barricaded. The shooter approached on one side of the church building, and on that side, at least two doors, it appears there had been like a 2x4 placed. So not all of the doors around the building, but on the side where the shooter did fire.
And on the outside?
On the outside, yes.
Were there any explosives that were found?
The question was there any explosives? There were reports of that. There were no explosives or improvised devices that we found. I do believe there was one, I guess you would call it a smoke bomb, like not an explosive, but a sort of a firework that would release smoke.
And which side of the building? North, south?
The side that is closest to us, here, on this side. Yep.
Was this incident related also at these nearby homes?
I don't have specific information on that I can release. The question was, is he dead from a gunshot wound? The answer is yes. We believe he took his own life in the parking lot.
Was this outside or both inside that he was shooting?
The question was he shooting outside and inside? He was absolutely shooting outside of the building on the side of the church, inside through the windows. It appears he may have gone inside, but I don't believe we've located any casings inside the building. So I'm not certain if he fired also while inside. It appears, if not all, most of the shooting happened outside the building.
Is this shooting related to any other shootings that happened in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, Taylor's asking, is this related to any of the other shootings? This does not appear to be related to any other shooting in the city.
Do you know approximately how many rounds were fired?
The question was how many rounds? I would say it's in the dozens. We don't have an exact count. There's a sidewalk on the outside as well as a grassy area. So obviously we are going through and taking our time to process the scene.
Was he firing just one weapon, like the rifle?
The question was he firing one weapon? We believe he had fired all three. He had a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol.
Chief, was this individual licensed to conceal and carry? Did he have any?
Were the weapons, was he lawfully carrying the weapons? I don't have that information, and I don't have any information on any significant criminal history either.
Was he dressed at all in any tactical type of gear or anything?
It appeared he had some black clothing on, his cargo type pants, I guess you could interpret that as, you know, however you like.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for helping us to get the information out today. We have a lot more work that needs to be done. We will return back later today to provide more